They say the wind of the Hind desert carries blood, and on the day the young prince lost his mother to a coup, that wind came raging through the gates, thick and heavy with fate. The vow he made, kneeling beside the blood-darkened stones, set him on a solitary path. But before we begin, if you're drawn to stories with mystery, meaning, and the otherworldly, to legends passed down as truth, then this is the channel for you. I share new stories each week drawn from folklore, forgotten history, and strange events that linger at the edge of belief. So tap the like button and subscribe with all notifications on so you never miss what's next. Let's begin. There once lived a prince in the southern deserts of Hind. He was the son of this battle-hardened king, but he was different from his father. He was not driven by conquest. Now, he didn't speak much, and when he did, it was asking questions that no one really had the answers to. He spent long days alone in the palace gardens, just kind of listening to the wind. One day, while he was wandering the oldest wing of the palace archives, a place where basically nobody ever went and it was only allowed for the royal family to enter, he discovered this set of sealed scrolls. They were hidden underneath some floorboards and they were tied with this faded red twine. Inside these scrolls were instructions for this ancient training that dated back to before the kingdom was even established. This training was not for war, but it was for evasion, how to gain speed and balance, a type of light body mastery. These techniques allowed someone to move with precision and silence. It focused more on deflection rather than striking. Now, he studied these in silence, practiced in secret. He didn't let anyone know what he was doing. He trained endlessly. So first he would train with the guards, and then after everyone left, he would train by himself in the practice yard. And nobody had a clue, but they could tell he was changing. The king worried. His son no longer joined the feasts. He ignored visiting nobles, and he spent more time just kind of out in the garden, breathing, and the king couldn't really tell what he was doing. Whispers in the court grew. Some said that the prince had these visions. Others feared that he was broken. So the king's trusted advisor, a man who had been with the king even before his son was born, had an idea. He said, "Send him hunting. I'll ride with him. Let him taste the blood of the wild. He must know the thrill of pursuit, the clarity of danger." So the king agreed, and the prince went on this great hunt. That particular day, the wind was clawing at their cloaks and hissed across the dunes as if it remembered the blood that it once carried. They spotted a beast not long after sunrise. Now, it wasn't a gazelle or a warthog. It was actually something larger, something with this odd silver fur. "After it!" cried the advisor. He gave chase over dunes and through wind-sheared ravines, but the beast always stayed just a little bit ahead of him. And then finally, it vanished, and the prince found himself alone. No tracks, no sound, no advisor, just emptiness. He got off the horse, he looked to the sun, and he just kind of waited. And that's when he heard a cry. It was a girl, weeping. She stood near a pile of stones. Her robes were torn, and her face streaked with dust and tears. "I fell down this ravine from our caravan," she said. "I don't know where my people are." Prince offered her water and said, "You can ride on my horse. Let's go find your family together." So they rode slowly. Not far ahead, they came upon these old ruins, and there was a lot of broken stone that had been scorched by the sun. The girl stirred. "Please," she said, "let me step away for just a moment. I must relieve myself." So he said, "Okay, sure." He helped her down, and then she went into the ruins. He waited for quite a while, and then he thought, okay, well, I better go check on her, see if she's okay. And then as he approached, he heard her. He heard her voice, but it was changed. It was rougher. She was no longer weeping, and she was talking to someone. "Yes," she said, "he is strong. The blood of kings runs hot. Feed well, my children." And then the prince heard this hissing chorus of replies from many mouths. He stepped back slowly. The girl, or creature, emerged. Her form had twisted, her limbs stretched, her face kind of split with rows of teeth too long for her skull. She then lunged, and the prince's horse fled. But the prince didn't fight. Instead, with a deep breath and a shift in his stance, he launched. His feet barely touched the sand before lifting again. He darted across rock and dune like a ribbon on the wind. His body moved with balance honed by years of training, gliding, vaulting, rebounding off crumbling walls and jagged stone. The ogress shrieked and followed. Now, she was earthbound. She was kind of twisted by weight and hunger. She leapt after him, but he veered, touched the edge of a half-buried pillar, and then soared across a gorge she couldn't cross. For a period of time, she gave chase, but then she slowed. And he did not. He just kept going. Now, he vanished beyond the dunes. He was carried not by strength, but by skill, by his practice. He went over rocks, and he didn't look back. She followed, but he did not run blindly. Every breath was very controlled. Every step he placed with care. He moved like the wind, not through force, but through stillness. This is what he had trained for. He ended up vaulting over the edge of a dry riverbed and slipped into this shallow crevice, pressing his body flat against the rock. Now, eventually, he could hear the ogress coming, snorting in the air. She was slower, but she kept going. Her feet were dragging these sharp lines into the dunes, and something beneath her skin pulsed and shifted. So he closed his eyes, slowed his breath, and just let the fear kind of slide over him without sinking in. But that wasn't enough. He saw this shadow come over the crevice. She had found him. She lunged, her claws raking the stone just inches from his face. A terrible clash, almost like metal striking stone, the impact shrieking through the narrow chasm and echoing off the walls like a scream trapped in stone. He twisted away, drawing a short blade. She struck again and caught his arm, tearing fabric and skin. He rolled to the side, found his footing, and leapt. He moved as he had trained. Each step was light and calculated. He vaulted from rocks and then jumped from a wall and struck. He drove the blade deep beneath her collarbone. She howled, stumbled back, but she didn't fall. It wasn't enough. She came again. This time he didn't run. He turned into the wind. A deep calm settled over him. Not peace, but focus. It sharpened his hearing, and the whole world seemed to just slow down. Every sound, every movement was within his grasp. He had his blade ready. She struck. He moved, not away, but through. So he went down, followed beneath her guard, and with this one fluid motion, he came up, slashed her once, and then slashed her again across the throat. The creature gasped, and she fell. He stood, panting. There was blood all over his face. There was the gash on his arm. His legs were trembling. Then slowly, he turned and left. The dunes were silent again. His horse had already gone. His arm was injured. His supplies were gone. The dunes seemed to shift constantly when he was moving. He walked through the desert using only the starlight and just kind of his instinct. By day, he found shade, and he traveled predominantly at night. Three days later, he had finally seen the edge of the dunes, and then he saw the palace, and he arrived at home. At that point, he was thinner, he was silent. The servants came to patch his wound, bowed to his father, who rose from his throne, stepped down. He looked really concerned, and he said to the prince, "Where have you been? How did you lose the advisor?" The prince kind of lowered his gaze, and he's like, "Well, we were chasing the creature, the one with the silver fur, and I rode too hard, too fast, and it led me into these hills, and I didn't know where I was. Everything got kind of turned around. It seemed like the sun made weird shadows. I didn't know what was going on. I lost the path. And then I didn't even see the dunes for a while." Then the king stared at him for kind of a while, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Well, at least you're back. That's what matters." Well, the prince nodded and didn't say anything. That night, the prince then went to the advisor's chambers to ask the advisor, like, what the heck was that crazy creature? The advisor was not there, but there were these scrolls that he had unfurled across the floor. There was some incense that was burning in the corner. There were these small pile of bones in this shallow bowl. And on the back wall, he saw this really old language. It was older than the kingdom itself. Now, he could tell that was a curse. And it was a curse that was dating to the year of the prince's birth. From what he could read, he could tell that a creature would feed upon the royal bloodline. In exchange, the advisor would grow in power and be protected from age and death. So as he stood there, shocked, not knowing what to think, a gust of wind slammed the chamber doors shut. The advisor had returned. He was standing there right in the doorway. His eyes were black as coal. He said to him, "You survived." And then, with unnatural speed, the advisor struck. The prince barely had enough time to get his sword out. The guards rushed in, blades clashed. The advisor moved like smoke and fire, cutting down 3 men before the rest could even react. Now the prince, he fought with precision, but he was no match for sorcery. Then they heard a shout. The king himself had entered the chamber, sword in hand. And in the center of the room, the father and advisor met. Steel flashed, magic flared. They struck together. The king drove his blade into the advisor's chest, but not before a dark spike burst from the advisor's palm into the king's heart. The king dropped immediately, dead. But then something strange happened. The advisor's body flickered. Black smoke poured from the wound, swallowing his entire form. And in a blink, he was gone. Had the king killed him? Or was the advisor just using some sort of dark magic to help him get away? No one could really tell. But everyone was silent. Now, no one knew if the curse had been destroyed or if it had simply recoiled deeper into shadow. Well, the king was dead on the ground. The prince turned to the guards and said, "Burn it all." So the guards took down all the scrolls and all the bones and all the weird stuff that the advisor had gathered together to create the curse, and went out outside the palace walls and burned it, and everyone could see this dark smoke in the sky. That night, the prince stood at the window of his father's study, the crown next to him untouched. Now, he was not ready to be king, but he was king. And although the creature was dead and the advisor was gone, he did not know if the darkness was truly over. This story comes from 1001 Nights, though its roots reach back to a much older tale from ancient Persia, passed down long before it was ever written. Because the ancient path he walks is not yet complete, and whether the curse is truly gone or only wounded, the new king knows this: power isn't strength. Power is preparation. And some thrones are earned not by blood, but by what you survive. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if this one lingered with you, share it with someone who still believes that silence can be stronger than steel. I'll see you in the next story.